Hi, everyone. This is going to serve as office hours week 9 for our final week in the series. And I did ask Rebekah to come, Rebekah Wolf. I have worked with her for a very long time and probably like what, the last 5, 8 years now? When
Probably
did we
8 years.
meet?
Yeah.
8?
Yeah. Gosh, time flies.
Time flies. I know. I'm like,
Wow.
goodness. That's kind of weird to think about, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I'm just
really
having a
is.
moment right now. I'm like, wow. A lot happens. A lot
Yeah.
happens in 8 years, and it doesn't
A
feel like
lot
that
has
long.
transpired. Yeah.
But it's beautiful to have you on. Thank you for agreeing to just, have a conversation around some of the material and just tying some things in. I know you do some work in, can you say it again? Quantum body work?
Yeah, quantum
Okay.
body work. So it's
So
basically energy sessions, but we utilize the quantum field to work on all levels of our accessibility because it is infinite.
so we're gonna dive into that as far as just how that even connects to some of the material from these, not just last 3 weeks, but we've had conversations even around. And one of the things that I did want to ask you to speak on was the protective layer of food and
Mm,
the difference between food that absorbs all light or partial light,
mm.
because there were some very interesting pieces in that sense that we were talking on the other day. But maybe just to kind of open and start with, when we talk about this infinite piece, week 7, we talked a lot about chakras and nadis and the glandular system. And I'm just wondering if there is anything from your work or experience, right? We've talked about sound and meditation and frequency. Just kind of starting in that capacity. If
Yeah.
there's anything, yeah, that you'd like to speak to or tie together, because there's so much in these realms, and I kind of made the joke in each video, like this could be its own 9 week series, because literally it could.
So
Um,
true.
yeah, just anything that you feel
So
called
true.
to share that's like intuitively coming through.
Yeah. I mean, each week that I tuned in, I was just like, whoa. I absolutely love just everything you put together. And then I would send you an email. I'm like, we can nerd out on this for like a whole. I was just like, this is connected this and this. But we are infinite and there's so many different layers to us. In speaking about the sound, I love what came through with the research around the gong because I play gong when I teach yoga. And um, our own sound is the most healing sound. Like we have our own built-in sound bath. So like humming, there's research around like if you have incessant thoughts or you're in that broken record loop, start humming because apparently we can't focus on the thought and the humming at the same time. And then we're aligning our body, our sound through that vibration of our own healing vessel that lives right inside us. So it's so beautiful because it's like the ripples that come out from those spaces. And, if you think about all of the patterning, whether it's like from when we were young, like survival techniques of not being able to use our sound or use our voice or speak up or speak our truth or be our whole selves, that's all like limiting that vibration, that input of our own healing. Our voice can change based on the how do I want to say this? Our voice changes, like our tone changes based on where we are in our healing journey. Because as we become closer to our resonant vibration
Mhm.
or our truest self, our soul self, the frequency of the soul gets more and more aligned with that vibration. So just like singing or humming to yourself just really helps perpetuate that movement forward in alignment. So
I had a question and then I
yeah.
lost it because this question feels way more important to ask. So, some of the work that I did with you and my personal journey had a lot to do with my thyroid.
Hmm.
And over the last couple years, as I worked to come off actual medication and use sun and all the various things that I literally teach on now because of that journey.
Hmm.
One of the things that I learned about the thyroid gland is that it is one of the, you know, largest components, not just of metabolic function, but also gut and digestion. And so
Hmm.
I'm very curious, like the thing that just kind of came to me was like, right, looking at that, is it the thyme, is it, it's the thyroid gland, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so if
Hmm.
that gland is not used to our own sound, right? Our own frequency.
Hmm.
How does that impact gut health if the thyroid is that connection to metabolic and literal digestion?
Hmm. There's definitely a ripple effect there. Um, so when you're having, let's call it an imbalance in the thyroid,
Mhm.
um, there will be that ripple effect down through the system. So the thyroid's going to add some of those shopping tags to our
Okay.
list of how the gut is going to pull out the nutrients, what we need, vitamin wise, this and that.
Mm.
But
Okay.
if it's getting missed, the shopping tags aren't getting added to the list, then as it goes through, we're not pulling out everything that we need essentially to. Mm, so, another way to say that would be all of the potentials we could get from our food, we would miss some of those inputs through the gut biome because there's an imbalance. The tickets aren't getting kind of tagged through
Got
the
it.
system.
Okay.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
even then, I just think from like stress response, not necessarily looking at like what we looked at in week one, but having, been trained as like a traditional trauma therapist,
Hmm.
the way that I've looked at or I've been taught to look at a lot of the physiology of the gut is, oh, this is a byproduct of trauma. And to hear you say at the beginning, right, like, oh, if we're growing up and we're not even able to use our own voice because of safety mechanism, right? We can
Hmm.
see these underlying aspects of mitochondria and ATP and the various things that we've talked about with like blood sugar and just patterns of the body, right? From those
Yeah.
first couple videos. But it also kind of feels like it's not just digestion of food, but also this like full shift in even how the development of your microbiome can come online and
Hmm.
potentially then even like susceptibility to like I've worked with a couple clients who have had I'm not gonna say this right because I can't think of it, but HP pylori or something like that, like these
Okay.
like gut infections.
Hmm.
And I'm just, as you say that, I'm like, huh. Like it to me, and I don't have an answer, but I'm just kind of putting it out there, nor do I expect an answer from you. But I find these interconnections to be so fascinating that it's like instead
Hmm.
of seeing, right, like the gut as, a trauma response or, oh, well, I can't digest food because I have anxiety or I've had trauma. It's like, well, yes, and
And
right, can we look at it through a very different lens that will
hmm.
give you a very different course of action to take
Hmm.
instead of just sitting down with a therapist and talking about it, or maybe even doing, EMDR or brain spotting or something, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like those techniques are great and they can be helpful for a lot of people. And unless our larger view of ourself changes,
Yeah.
I almost feel like there's still a level of like stuckness that one can experience in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. You've hit so many points there. So, okay. So one thing that came through really strongly is you said let's call it a dis-ease or imbalance in the gut, that there was an infection. So, um, anytime there's an infection, there's an imbalance in our bacteria
Okay.
as like let's make that our like base. So bacteria feeds virus, virus feeds fungus.
Okay.
Bacteria begins in our organs, virus lives in our tissue, fungus lives in our nervous system. Okay.
Okay.
So, and the blood strives to maintain a balanced alkalinity. So, right around like that 7.2, 7.4
Okay.
is technically where our blood should like read. Um, and if we have inputs of like medication or a lot of processed food or just energetically where we're not able to like speak our truth or speak in general or um, get all of the nutrients coming from our inputs through the gut, and it creates this dis-ease or imbalance in that bacteria. You're then creating a ripple effect for all of these other potentials. And if the body can't safely move out a toxin, so toxins are going to be created at, we talked in, I think it was week 1 or 2, you mentioned how the cell works and the toxins, how like the inputs then become the outputs. And if the cell itself doesn't have everything it needs to neutralize the toxin, it's just going to store it. So stored toxins in the body then create, until it has what it needs to take it out safely, holding on to it, it creates a toxic environment. So then we came around to, I'm not sure if you actually touched on, I can't remember the parasites, but it came up in one of our conversations. But a toxic environment is the breeding ground for parasitic activities or blooms, because, you know, it's not. So parasites, we don't all have parasites because the gut biome and parasites can often get kind of like confused in like what their roles are.
Okay.
Um, but we can be carrying a parasite without actually having any like symptoms of having a parasite.
Okay.
But as soon as we're in that toxic imbalance, like we don't have what we need to carry it out, that's where the parasitic blooms come in. And
Mm.
it's those parasitic blooms are then feeding bacteria, virus, fungus. So then the organs, the tissues, and the nervous system all have these ripple effects of this toxin that we can't
Yeah.
safely remove from our body. Um, so like the ripple of just one input. I mean, you were talking earlier about that Russian doll,
Yeah.
the inner thought, but what's the overarching thought processes or belief that we are holding, whether it's conscious or subconscious, that can change so that the whole container itself begins to change.
My mind is blown right now. Seriously, like to even just consider that the parasite and that toxic environment gets to be part of the input system, right? Like visually speaking, just I I forget the name of the show, but it was a spin-off of like one of those like witch shows on like Netflix or something, like
Mm,
Black Mirror, Black Magic, like
mm,
something like that, like in like I'd say the early mid 2000s. Um, but there's a video, not a video, but one of the episodes that I'm thinking of when I think about parasites, like I think about this thing that's like living inside of me, that's like a snake or a worm or you know what I mean, like something, and
mhm,
I just need to take that thing out
mhm,
instead of it literally being an energy or something that is a a connected input because the thing can't come out itself.
mhm, mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense in the way that I just said it, but I just
Yeah,
have this like visual of like what they did in the show, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not it at all. Um,
yeah.
and so then to even just consider like something else that came up as you were speaking was, this last week we touched on circadian rhythm, and I've
Mm,
talked about cell apoptosis and a couple different pieces, but that the necessity of the body to have this regular sleep pattern so that those processes that literally occur while we are asleep can
mhm,
occur while we are asleep. And
mhm.
it's like if we're eating right before bed, right, or we have like a high sugar
Yeah.
diet or a highly processed diet, or we're not moving, or we're just not engaging in the ways for the body to literally do what it needs to do, the adaptation that is the response to give it the thing that it needs until that thing can actually come in. Like it, to me, just goes back, and it may, I hope this lands for people in the way that I'm about to say it. And if not, listen to it a couple of times. But it's like when we talk about every response in the body being healing, that's exactly what I like. That's exactly what I mean by it. Like the
Mhm.
body is not doing something because it's stupid and does not know how to do it. It
Exactly.
it is completely intelligent. We may not like the outcome of what it is presenting to us, but then
Yes.
where can we fully take that? Like, self-proclaimed agency to
Mm.
learn the things to actually create these, whether you want to call them new schemas, but just these like real foundational pieces of like, oh, I actually know how to work with this thing now because I have knowledge that I didn't have before, and that new knowledge actually lets me do this fuller reframe of these belief systems, especially when I can start to see what's there instead of it just being unconsciously there.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful. I I've been saying a lot recently, and recently I mean by like the last 3, maybe 4 years, is like the importance of learning the language of our body.
Mhm,
You know, from one perspective, we're taught that symptoms are something to be fought. And, you know, if we can look at, say, a symptom that's presenting and be like, oh, body, how can I support you in this?
mhm,
And then choose the inputs to support that sensation or feeling or feedback that the body's giving, you're then offering that potential output to be different.
mhm.
And the healing, you're now working with your body versus seeing it as something separate than
Yeah.
yourself. And I mean, just that as an aha and like allowing us to drop into this incredibly wise human form that we get to walk around in
Yeah.
is just changes everything. It
Mhm.
literally changes everything. If we can have that thought of like, it's so magnificent.
Yeah.
It knows exactly what it's doing, but it can also, we can support it. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to do it all on its own.
Exactly. Exactly.
And if we
Well,
learn
and
that language, it's just, yeah.
well, I was gonna say, learning the language, it's like we're not, I believe we're not intentionally taught the language for a variety of different reasons we can
Oh,
get
yeah.
into at other times. We'll probably do a series just on that because, if
Hmm.
you watch the beginning of week 9, there's a ton of legalese language that we can go into. That yeah, would support that what's the word I want to say? That statement. We'll go with that.
Miss in our education system.
Miss in our education system. Absolutely. But even, as you say that, it's funny. My sweet little pup is
Oh,
sleeping on the couch.
my baby
Um,
girl.
yeah, she's the sweetest. But it's funny because so I show her and I share this because taking into consideration, right, what you just said about like the body and the healing, we get so caught up as humans in what we have been culturally taught to do with our day and the demands
Mm,
of the day and living in a way that does not support our
mm,
system.
mhm,
We took her to the beach yesterday in the morning and she ran for probably an hour and a half. Like I'm talking like chasing after these little birds, playing with other
mm.
dogs, like
Oh my
full
God.
speed, just going at it. Like you could tell in her eyes when we went to go do laundry after she was just like, and she slept through the night. And even this morning, normally when I grab her leash, I'm like, let's go for a walk. She's like, yeah, let's go. Da-da-da. I've got all this energy to get out. And she didn't even stand up. She was laying on the ground. There were probably 5 or 6 different ground squirrels that were, within 10 feet of her. She let them all go. She would normally chase them. And I'm like, you're tired today.
Yeah.
I can tell you're tired today. Um, and so I just think, when we can remember, right, that we are a part of nature and that the way that we've been culturally taught to look at ourselves and others and participate in whether you want to call it, colonialism or capitalism or whatever it is, right?
Mm.
She doesn't worry about any of that stuff. She just
Not
does
one
what her
ounce.
body tells her to do because she listens to it and trusts it all the time. That it's like
Yes.
if we didn't have that cultural programming,
Hmm.
how much more can we tune in? And even though
Yeah.
we do have that cultural programming, how much more can we become aware of that and make changes in our life to obviously still, do what needs to be done in order to survive based on the world we live in, but
Right.
recognize these pieces of like inherent knowledge and physiology and question like, do I actually need that thing? Or do I even
Hmm.
want that thing?
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's a literal like I guess everything is a product. I was going to say whether it's like a shopping bag or, you know what
Mm,
I mean? Like going out and getting food. Like when you talk about, can you choose the input to support the actual language of the body?
mhm.
What do you need to learn about how the body speaks? And then what inputs, feel good that you get to
Yeah.
keep doing each and every day because that is the language.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting too because the quality of the inputs is something you talked about in a couple of the videos, like it came back around. And just as we understand the language, we're taught a few different things. One is like we need a lot of fuel, and that's not necessarily the case in all things,
Yeah.
So part of that learning the language is, understanding when I sit down to have a meal, do I need a full big plate or, you know, when's that full meter and where am I satiated that that's enough? Because digestion takes work.
Mhm.
The body has to work to digest, and it's something it knows how to do. But then you can think of like, okay, so there's certain foods that um, take the full spectrum of light to grow versus other foods take certain light spectrums to grow. And if our cells are mimicking our inputs because we are light, and if the food takes the full spectrum of light, then I generally try and choose foods that are full spectrum light because they tend to offer themselves. They have a greater capacity to digest themselves, making it easier on my physical body in the digestive process, like they're working together versus the body having to do all the work itself.
Yeah.
Um, One of the examples I love to give because it's like something you can do on your counter is like a pear versus an apple. Apples self-preserve themselves as they fall off the tree, whereas pears don't have that.
Mhm.
So a pear takes full spectrum of light to grow. So if you put a pear and an apple on your counter and just watch them, one will eat itself. The other one will look perfect, probably like 2 or 3 weeks later. Yeah.
That is fascinating. I didn't even think
Yeah.
about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I remember there, and I need to find it, but I'm wondering if like, people were to reach out to you after seeing this. Is that like I remember there was a magnet that you gave us in one of
Mm.
the Reiki trainings that had the list of full light
Oh,
spectrum food. Do you still have
yes. I
that?
do have access to that. Yeah.
Would you be
The website
willing?
is not up anymore, but
Okay.
yeah, I can definitely send them the food list. The peak food list is what
Okay.
my husband calls it. He's the one that taught me about the light spectrum in the food that he learned from his mentor that was originally Swedish. Actually, he was an alien, but
I
he was Swedish.
Some of the best ones are, I'm learning.
But this man was incredible. But he spent a lot of he was a if I remember correctly, he was a doctor in Sweden, but then started going to all of these indigenous cultures and learning like their medicine
Okay.
or understanding of like medicine
Hmm.
from like an indigenous culture, like how they use the land or the plants for medicine and how that contributed to the physical body. And then when he came over to the States, he had his own practice using these specific like herb combinations and stuff like that. And it's what he taught my husband when he was a teenager, when he went to see him for healing for all kinds of things. Um, yeah, and really took him under his wing. So that's how Peak was kind of born. My husband just carried it on once he passed. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
some of the
But yeah, they
most
can get that list. It's quite fascinating.
it
That week that you talked about, like the tryptophan and the glucose level
hmm
and stuff like that, um, you had mentioned in a couple of the slides some foods, and I just took them and did the translation to like the peak list. So like
yeah.
for like beef or a red meat, we choose bison.
Mhm.
And for the eggs, we choose duck eggs, and just did like a simple Google like beef versus
Yeah.
bison and like the levels of the tryptophan and like how it all works. And they came back as like just slightly higher. It's not like saying beef is bad or chicken eggs are bad. It's just like in thinking of like, okay, so if I want to support my body and not doing as much work in the digestive process, like based on how I'm feeling today, well,
Yeah.
I might choose bison or a duck egg as my protein intake if
Good.
I'm not a vegan, and eat those because I'm going to get a little bit more feedback and support for my body in those spaces. But yeah, it's fascinating to just like expand your perspective into those spaces.
Yeah, totally. I want to ask you one more question just before
Hmm.
we close, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because that first question came back and clearly it was supposed to go away because we just did a whole beautiful thing with the other one that came in. When you were talking about just, our own sound being the most healing thing available to us, you mentioned
Hmm.
humming. How does, and my guess would be that it would kind of be the same frequency, but again, a little more, I'll use the word intentional, I guess. How does mantra come into that?
Mm. Yeah, well, now because you're actually saying words, right? Words have their own vibrational frequency.
Yeah.
And that you talked about with Dr. Emoto's work,
Mm-hmm.
where the word itself created a specific design pattern
Yep.
in the water. So when you're adding mantra, you're adding a vibration or let's say a picture to the cells of your blood or the waters that are within you, that are that intention or that words.
Yeah.
So still healing, it's just you're changing the input slightly.
We're gonna have to have another conversation just about words later. Well, because I was just thinking like, mantras are so different than just, um, in my opinion,
Hmm.
very different than just like traditional prayer or a blessing, right? And I
Yes.
just say that because of the origin of where they have come from and the changes in how our own language has
Hmm.
become. I
Hmm.
don't know that I pulled this up. Actually, I think I did in the etymology office hours for week one. The word nice, right?
Oh,
We're
yes,
taught
yes, you did.
like,
Hmm.
oh, nice, have a nice day. That was so nice of them, right? And
Hmm.
you think about how many times you're saying it, what you think you're saying, and really you're kind of cursing somebody in some way,
Yeah,
shape, or form, right? Like, have a
yeah.
foolish day, be ignorant,
Hmm.
take care, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to do that to somebody, by all means, please do. I did that once to a gentleman who was taking Shiva for a walk, and he decided to berate me as I was trying to train her about what side of the street I should be walking on in Idlewild
Oh,
as I'm walking my dog in residential where you go 10 miles an hour. And I was like, I'm not listening to you. I was like, have a nice day. And I meant it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
meant it.
exactly. Oh my gosh, so true.
It
Yeah.
was just one of those. I was like, don't come correct me right now. I'm in the middle of something.
Yeah.
But I just go back to that, that mantra and even some of the mantras in Kundalini, right, where they come
Hmm.
from very deep, deep origin points that word has gone unchanged because it
Hmm.
is not native. It's not English, right? It's
Yeah.
easy and in the world we live in, I think they say it takes like 2 generations to kind of make a change or put something new into,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
the cultural uh
Yeah.
learning or, I don't know the word I'm looking for right now necessarily, but even just looking at kids and some of the slang that they use, right? It's like,
Oh my gosh.
what does that even mean? Like, what are you saying right now?
Yeah. Where did that come
Where
from?
did that come from? I have no idea. And like some people are like, I'm cool, I know this word. And it's like, that's great. And do you know what that word means?
Yeah.
Where did it
Yeah.
start? What are you saying? Where
Yeah.
I feel like when it comes to mantra and some of those practices, right, because of their origin,
Hmm.
they're they're more preserved.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's not lost in translation because
Yeah.
you're chanting the original seed sound of the
Hmm.
sound itself. Because even though it's if you're doing Sanskrit specifically, it is
Yeah.
a word, but it's more of sounds strung together,
Okay.
right? So, um, and like our words, because they are vibrations, they do carry energy. It is like that word nice, it's like casting a spell.
Hmm. Yep.
So being mindful not only of the orientation of your thoughts or the the pattern of the thought itself, but also like how are you expressing yourself? So one of the things I tried to become very mindful of is not saying I can't. So I
Hmm.
can't wait, or um, so instead of saying I can't wait to do something with someone, it's like I'm so excited. I'm shifting the vibration.
Hmm.
Um, and instead of like taking the lower vibrational part of that sentence. So
Yep.
it's being mindful of like every single word that we say carries a pattern, it carries a vibration, it carries a frequency. Are we actually saying what we mean?
Yeah. 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 If people wanted to get in contact with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Through my website, actually.
Okay.
I'll let you just post it with the thing. So
Okay.
it's just my first and last name, but Rebekah's spelled a little different. It's RebekhaWolf.
I'll throw it in the description at the bottom. They can
Okay,
reach out.
perfect.
Thank you so much for taking the time
Thank
this
you.
morning
What
just
an
to
honor.
share. And it's, again, just like Bethany, you are definitely someone that when I have the opportunity to speak with and just have these back and forth, it's like so much comes through and there's so much just like, yeah, learning and knowledge and just very grateful to know you.
Oh, same, same. It has been a beautiful journey, and I'm just so proud of you and so honored, really, to be on this path.
I appreciate that.
You're
Appreciate
amazing.
that. Glad to. For those listening, yeah, this is kind of weird to say this is the last office hours for this series, but obviously feel free to reach out with any questions. I'll leave Rebecca's information at the bottom of the video. I'm going to stop the recording here, but I hope you guys have a beautiful day.